So Bastionhost is a fully managed service that provides more secure and seamless remote desktop and SSH for Linux, RDP for Windows, to virtual machines in Azure without any exposure through public IP addresses. So you actually don't need to expose your virtual machine by allocating a public IP address to it, and then anyone from the internet can connect to it. You can in fact use a Bastion. Now let's understand this image. Let's understand the first part of this image, the bigger square. This is your user, how you are connecting to your virtual machine. When Bastion host was not there, you were connecting to Azure portal from your system, which is a secure connection for sure because Azure portal uses certificates. And then from Azure portal, you were hitting connect to connect this VM, and then you were typing the public IP. And that's where the communication is not secure. But now that Bastion host service is there, what will happen? You will connect to Azure portal securely. You will also connect to Bastion service securely. And then from the Bastion service, you will connect to your VM. So your entire communication is end-to-end encrypted, end-to-end secure. And that's what brings security to the system. This virtual machine is now not exposed over the internet, and only you can connect to this virtual machine, or only people who have access to the Bastion host service can connect to this virtual machine. And Bastion host service is local to the network, is part of your virtual network. So only you can connect to the Bastion host service, or the people who add to your network, to your account, they can connect to Bastion host. That's the benefit of Bastion host service. Let's not talk about the other box. So let's just provision a Bastion host service so that we don't need public IP addresses on our VM, and we have secure connectivity to the VMs. So what we need to do, we need to create a Bastion host. Now, as I said, Bastion host is part of your network. So what you need to do, in the search bar, you can type Bastion. Is everyone with me here?
Yes.
Okay. Let's click on Bastion in the search bar. When you click on this, it says no Bastion host. There is no service here with the name Bastion host. So we'll create one. Now we are going to create a Bastion host or jump host. We'll select our resource group. We'll select the name. So I can select my network name basically, where I'm creating this Bastion host, and I can put -bh, which means that this Bastion host is part of this network. Region will be East US by default. Bastion host has 2 tiers, basic and standard. I'll go with basic. When tiers are like varieties, when there are multiple varieties, the varieties differs from the capabilities that it provides. I'll go with the default, which is basic. Then it says virtual network. This Bastion host is nothing but a virtual machine which will be provisioned by Azure in your network. And that virtual machine will have a public IP. You will connect to that virtual machine or the Bastion service. And then from that virtual machine, you will connect to rest of the virtual machines on its private IP. That's the similar concept. So I'll select my subnet. Now, the moment I'll select my subnet, I'll get an error. I get an error. It says to associate a virtual network with a Bastion host, it must contain a subnet with the name Azure Bastion subnet with prefix of at least 27. Read this carefully. And as I told you, there are a couple of services in Azure which requires their own subnet. They don't share subnet with anyone else. So this service also needs its own dedicated subnet, just like gateway. Now we will first need to create this subnet, and it has already given you the name. Even if you do a small mistake in this name, it will not work. It has to be the same name, Azure Bastion subnet, and the prefix should be /27, which means you're losing 32 IPs once again. But there is a benefit to it. Those IPs will be used by this service to actually provide you multiple connections. Using the same Bastion host, you can connect up to 200 virtual machines at the same time. or 200 people can use the same Bastion host service to take RDP of 200 virtual machines. So that's why it needs some IP addresses for their internal availability perspective. So now we need this. Let's do one thing. Instead of losing this page, let's duplicate the tab, right click on the tab on the top and click on duplicate. You'll see the same tab. And here, let's open your virtual network. Let's go to the virtual network, select our first virtual network where we need to create this Bastion host. Go to the subnets and add one subnet for the Bastion host. So the name of the subnet is Azure Bastion host. So I'm sorry, Azure Bastion subnet. That was the name, right, guys? Let's see, Azure Bastion subnet.
Yes.
And it has to be in the same order. You want to try, just make a mistake, just even if you make it a order instead of A caps, even if you do this, small, it will not work. Azure will not recognize it. So you will need to use the same Azure Bastion subnet. Then it has given you the address range. Azure already knows that you have used till 96, which is 128. It is giving you /28. I will use /27 because that's the recommendation from Azure for Bastion host. And I'll click on create this subnet. So I've created the subnet. And once this subnet is created, I'll go back to my previous tab over here. And I will just refresh the screen. How do I refresh the screen? I'll select another network and then I'll select the first network. That's it. And see, the moment I've selected my first network, it has taken the Bastion subnet by default. It already knew that yes, in this network, there's a subnet dedicated for me and it has selected it. Let me know when everyone is done with this.
Can you show that IP again, Raghu?
Which IP?
While you created this Bastion subnet, no?
Okay.
Azure Bastion subnet.
By default, I will say Azure will already be giving you the next available range. You just need to select /27 instead of /28.
Bastion subnet, okay. Okay, I created one. Successfully added. Okay, now can you go to that second tab, create Bastion? Yeah.
Did everyone get the subnet?
I'm getting error. So instant details, the name should be what actually?
You can put any name. That's the name of your Bastion host. And I'm just using some consistency in my nomenclature. Since I'm deploying this Bastion host in my VNet 1, so I'm using my virtual network name -BH. BH stands for Bastion host.
I'm confused here. So
Why?
My
Why
subnet is created, but when I go to the Bastion to create under the drop down, my subnet is not visible.
exactly, same is happening.
Refresh the page. Refresh the page, it will come.
Okay.
Henry, is it coming for you?
Yeah, I have it.
Okay. Akshay, is it working now?
But it says the selected subnet is not supported.
Because you may not have named the subnet correctly. Look at the nomenclature. It has to be Azure A caps, Bastion B caps, subnet S cap. S is an uppercase. It has to be the same name. Even if one mistake, it will not work.
How to rename that, Raghu? Now we have, like you said, I have not renamed it correctly. Sorry.
Delete the subnet and recreate it again.
Okay.
Okay.
When you need to delete a subnet, when you are on the subnet blade, right next to subnet, you see the 3 horizontal dots. Click on it, delete it, and recreate it, and make sure the name is same.
We added the Bastion subnet to VNet 1, and both virtual networks are appearing in the dropdown now. So even if we had added to VNet 2, would that be fine?
No, if you have added the Bastion subnet to VNet 1, then you will select VNet 1. Then only this under subnet, you will see Bastion. If I select VNet 2, it will give me an error. Because for the other network, I don't have a subnet.
Yes, I agree that. I mean, I only added that subnet in VNet 1, but now both of them are appearing in the dropdown. Earlier, none of them were appearing.
You want to say which dropdown? VNet dropdown?
Yes, virtual network dropdown.
Yep. In the virtual network dropdown, you will see both the virtual network by default. See, virtual network dropdown is coming because of this location, region. You've selected East US as location, as region. In East US, all the virtual networks that you have will be appearing in the dropdown. The virtual network that you select, if that virtual network has a subnet with the name Azure Bastion subnet, then it will come by default. If it does not have a subnet, then it will give you an error on the NAS. As I said, Bastion host will need a public IP. So you will need to create a new public IP, or you can use existing. We don't have an existing public IP, so we can use this public IP that Azure is suggesting. However, let's just change the name. It says IP just to relate that which service this IP belongs to. I'll just put BH, which is Bastion host, PIP, so that when I look at this public IP address, I would know, okay, this public IP address belongs to my Raghuveer VNet virtual network, and there's a service with the name Bastion host to which it is associated. So that's the reason I'm just changing it BHPIP, Bastion host PIP. Okay, that's it. Now you can click on review plus create. And you can create this service. So what will happen in the backend? Microsoft will provision a Windows-based virtual machine in your virtual network in that Bastion host subnet with this public IP that you have just chosen. And you can connect to this Windows-based virtual machine or Bastion service to actually RDP all the VMs that you have in your network. And it will be a browser-based connection, which basically means that if you have local restriction on your system, it will bypass those restrictions. So it is not actually bringing a security loophole. This is actually strengthening the security, because now you are not connecting to those VMs to its public IP. So it is a workaround in case of MasterCard, but it is actually a security service which helps you, or which which allows you which gives you the ability to not allow or to not allocate public IPs to VM. So this will take 2 to 3 minutes to get provisioned. I know it takes time, Bastion host. Now,
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about this Bastion? Does it mean that you need to be able to access via this Bastion host access to the portal, or is it available for, like, say, could you share the details with someone else?
This is only through the portal.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
That's the reason it is. This service is only available through the book. Now, while the service is getting created, we'll just go back to our virtual machines, these two virtual machines. We don't need public IPs anymore on this virtual machine now, because we are creating Bastion, and using the Bastion, we'll connect to the virtual machines. Okay. So let me first disconnect from the remote desktop. I'll just hit here and disconnect. I'm disconnected. Now these two public IP addresses, there's a charge for public IP address, and there's a charge for Bastion or service as well, guys. Okay. So I want to save money now, and I want to make my environment secure. I'll just release these two public IP addresses. How do I release it? I'll click on my first VM. Everyone, please follow me. So select your first VM on the overview tab. Now, as I told you, IP addresses are allocated at the network interface card, not on the VM. Network interface card is attached to the VM. That's the relationship is. So anything to do with IP addresses, you will always click on under settings, networking tab, this networking tab. You will click on networking tab, which will show you your network interface card. This is the network interface card, which will always have the VM name and then some numerals which Microsoft adds. So this network interface card, you will click on this network interface, and it will take you to the network interface card blade, overview blade. Then you will click on under settings IP configuration. Over here under settings IP configuration. When you click on the IP configuration, you will see this IP config. This is similar to typing IP config in your screen, and you will see the private IP address as well as public IP address. Excuse me. Then you need to click here on this strip anywhere. It will open another window where it says public IP address, dissociate is open, associate is already there because this public IP address is there. You will hit dissociate. So what you are doing, you are dissociating the public IP address from the network interface card, which is attached to your VM, and hit save. Dissociation means you are just detaching the public IP, but this public IP will continue to remain there in your subscription, and you will continue to get billed for it. So if you feel that you don't need this public IP in future, you can delete it. If you feel that I can reuse this public IP for some other service that I will provision, then let's just keep it. So we'll keep this public IP because we will need it in future. But I'm dissociating it from the VM. It's getting dissociated. Done. So public IP is dissociated. Now on the same screen, if I want, I can also make changes to the private IP. So on the same screen, I also see the private IP. Right now, the assignment is dynamic. If I say that, can you change the assignment, IP assignment for this VM from dynamic to static? This is where you need to come, and you can change the assignment as static, and then you can save it, which means this IP address 192.6.168.1.4, this IP address will be static to this VM, this SharePoint web server or this VM. Even if I shut down this VM and if I turn this VM 10 days later, it will always capture this IP address. Azure will not allocate this IP address to any other service. That's static. So I'm not making that static right now. And I'll just close this window. And I'll come back to my virtual machine blade and I'll just refresh it. And you will notice that the public IP address is gone from this virtual machine. Let me know if it is the same behavior for you.
Same.
Hi, Raghu.
Same.
Yeah.
When we are assigning the public IP address, then it will take the old one or new one if we reassociate it.
Then you will select which IP you want to associate. Machine will not decide what IP it will capture. You will tell it that this IP you need. So when you go to the assignment, once again, it will populate all the public IP addresses which are not allocated to any. You will pick and choose the IP address yourself.
Okay. Okay.
Now, with this similar manner, let's just quickly go ahead and release this public IP from the second VM as well. So same, you click on the VM, you go to the networking tab, then you click on the network interface, then you click on the IP configuration, then you click on this IP strip, and you hit dissociate and save.
There's also one other way you can do this, right?
Yeah, there are multiple ways. I mean, you can directly go to the public IP and dissociate it from there. There are multiple.
Yeah, I thought that's the way I've always done it traditionally, just the way I taught myself. This is interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So now both the public IPs are gone. Now, when both the public IPs are gone, it will just disappear. So now both the public IPs are gone. Now it becomes a perfect use case for Bastion host. I don't have a public IP on my VM. I cannot connect to it. I don't have a VPN connection. How will I connect to my VM in Azure? That becomes a perfect use case for Bastion host. So I will deploy a Bastion host, which I've already initiated. And by now, I hope my Bastion host is also deployed. Yep, it's deployed. Great. Now I will use this Bastion host to connect to RDP my VMs, RDP or SSH. How do I do this? I'll click on the VM once again, and I'll hit connect, and I'll select the third option, which is Bastion. When I select this option, I will get this window, I'll get this button that says use Bastion. I'll say yes, I'll click on it. Then it will identify if I have a Bastion host in my network or not. If there's a Bastion host, it will directly ask me for the username and password of the VM. If there is no Bastion host, then it will ask me to create Bastion host first. That's the behavior. Now, by default, this checkbox is open, which says open in new window. As I said, the RDP using the Bastion will be a browser-based session. If I uncheck this box, then on the same tab, RDP, VM RDP will come and I will lose this. So I'll check this box that says open in new window so that it opens another tab, another window, and I'll put the credential. Once I'm done with the credential, I'll just hit connect and see it has opened another tab. And now I'm getting RDP of my VM, which is a browser-based session, and it's a secure connection.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
Bastion.
Raghu, I am able to log in
Okay.
using Bastion.
Yeah, everyone will be able to log in. Now it has nothing to do with your laptop, with your corporate credentials and anything that sort, because it's a browser-based connection. If your corporate allows you to open Google Chrome, then Bastion will work.
Yeah.
So don't consider Bastion as a workaround only. Bastion is also a security service which lets you securely connect to your virtual machines in the event when there is no private connectivity between your system and your Azure network. That's one use case of Bastion. There is another use case of Bastion, which is every VPN connection has a limited bandwidth, right? Now you want to allocate that bandwidth to the actual users and to the administrators who needs to do administrative work. You can actually allocate Bastion service to them. So you can ask your administrators to use Bastion service to RDP into the VMs and do all the administrative work. And you can, and rest of the employees in the organization can continue to use the VPN connection for connecting to the internal applications. That way, you can segregate administrative traffic and user traffic, and you can also save the bandwidth. So this service became very popular during the pandemic time. How? When if a company has 2,000 employees, only 10% of those employees would be working from home at any point in time. During the pandemic, all 2,000 employees are working from home. And in order to connect to an application which is local to your office network, you need VPN. Now those 2,000 employees are connecting to the VPN, and the VPN is down because the VPN is not able to accommodate that increased bandwidth. Nobody has ever planned for it. Nobody knew that the pandemic will happen. So this became a great challenge, and that's where these services, came as a savior. So what organizations did, they said, okay, all the administrators use this service for connectivity so that we save some VPN bandwidth, and that bandwidth was utilized by the employees. Making sense?
Yeah, totally correct.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
So, Raghu, I have a doubt here.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so we created this Bastion only for this our virtual machine 1. So do we need to create the same Bastion for VM2, or just one is enough for all the PCs in the network, for all the machines in the network?
Okay, you're two step ahead of us. While we are learning to walk, you're already running. Let's see this. No, that's absolutely, it's a compliment. Okay, let's see this. Now we'll go back to our Bastion image once again. Where is my okay. Sometimes I lose access to my browser cursor, to my, okay. Where's my cursor? Here. All right, so let's see this. Now, for example, this was my first virtual machine. Let me try and see if I can connect to the other virtual machine. Everyone do this. Let's go to the other virtual machine and let's click on connect and let's click on Bastion. Click on use Bastion and see what happens. What it says. Create Bastion. Kyun? Because we don't have a Bastion host in this network.
Yeah.
Right? Does it mean that for every network you need to create a Bastion host? Yes. I'm saying this is how the design is. But do you know the price of Bastion host service? $5 a day. You will be charged for it.
Costly.
It is a bit costlier then. So when the service was initially released, this is how it would work. It would behave. You would need a Bastion host for each network that you have in your subscription. Customers shared a feedback with Microsoft and said, you know what? I have got a couple of network which only have 2 machines. It doesn't make sense to create a Bastion service just for 2 machines. And some customers had 100 machines in one network. It was making sense. But you also have networks with low number of virtual machines, then it was not making sense. So which means that this service does not have universal acceptance. Microsoft listened to it. Microsoft said, okay, you don't need to create multiple Bastion hosts, provided if you peer your network. If you have 2 networks which are paired with each other, you provision your Bastion host in any of the network, and the service will expand to the other network as well. That's exactly what you see in this image now.
That makes sense.
Now see this image, the other part of this image, the smaller box. This smaller box is also another virtual network. See, this is a virtual network. This is also a virtual network. And these 2 virtual networks are paired with each other. When they are paired, which means when they are connected with each other, using the same Bastion host, you're also expanding the RDP capability to the other VM in the other virtual network, which means this user can actually use this Bastion host to connect to all the 3 VMs, which is part of the same network where Bastion resides, as well as to these 2 VMs, which are part of a different virtual network. That's the answer to your question. Making sense, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see
So-
how it works in reality.
So will we do the VNet pairing next then, or?
That's what we are going to do now. That's exactly
Great.
what we're going to do now. But before we do VNet peering, we also need to validate our initial statement, which was virtual network creates isolation. Let's validate that statement now. So you have taken the remote of the first VM. Now from this VM, let's try and connect to the other VM. So what I'll do, I'll open a command prompt on this VM on my first Azure virtual machine. And from the command prompt, I'll ping the other VM. So I need the IP of the other VM. The IP of the other VM is 192.168.2.4. Okay. I'll try and ping the other VM now. So I'll put ping 192.168.2.4 and let's see if I'm able to do that. Pinging means sending some traffic, sending some communication to the other VM. It's failing.
Yeah.
Not working. Let me know if it is working for you guys.
No, it is getting timed out.
It is getting timed out. Great. Let's do the ping
Yeah.
once again, but this time just put -t so that it continues to ping. Okay. It will continue to ping and it will continue to fail. It's like this. Let's keep it this way. Let's minimize the screen. Let's also try one more thing. Maybe ping is disabled on the other VM. That's why it's not happening. Let's try an RDP, the other VM. So once again, you type remote desktop.
So
Yep.
RDP from the Bastion host. I mean,
No, not
we access.
from the VM, from the first
Yeah,
VM,
yeah, from the first VM. Okay.
from inside the VM.
Okay.
So 192.168.2.4. I'm trying to take RDP. I'm just trying to communicate to the other VM, which is part of another virtual network. And I'm just validating whether or not that communication is working. So I'm trying to RDP. Let's see if it works. Fine, it doesn't work for me. What about others? Is it working?
No,
Same
it's
error.
not. No, it's
Alright.
not. Same errors.
Nothing is working. Ping is not working. RDP is not working. Right?
Yeah.
Nothing is working.
Nothing works. Yes.
Which means this statement is really valid, that this red cross that I've put is making sense here, that no communication is there. I said this web server, right now I'm connected to this web server in the virtual network A through Bastion host. And then I'm trying to ping this web server, which is this 2.4, which resides in another network. I'm also trying to RDP, it's not working. Is this image making sense to everyone now?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes,
Let's-
yes.
Let's
Yeah.
get communication. How do we enable the communication? We'll go to our network, virtual network. Now, what we need to do, we need to connect both the networks. Earlier, what would happen? You will need to initiate connectivity from both the network. Then they will connect. Azure has made your life easier. Azure says, in one window, you can do the connectivity now. You select your local network and you select the other network and it will be connected. And it's pretty simple. It used to be a bit difficult, but now Azure has made it simple for you. What you need to do, select any of the network. Let's say I'll select the first network. And from the first network, now that we are in the first network, if you go to the connected device, you will see two devices. One is network interface, which basically means that it's a virtual machine. The other is Bastion host, which means it's a Bastion host service. So there are two services which are connected, and it also shows, but if you look carefully, for the Bastion host, you don't see an IP address because it's a dedicated subnet. You don't need to know what IP address is there. But in the subnet, you see it's a Bastion host subnet. So these are dedicated subnets. You will have very low visibility into how Microsoft is managing it, but what you will get in return is the high availability, is the service SLA. So these are the connected devices. Now we'll scroll down and we'll go to this peering option. So we'll click on peering where it says add. Does everyone see this option add?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Yep.
when you click on add peering, look carefully the options. It says this virtual network. This virtual network means the network that you are in. Okay. It says peering link name. You need to put a name. So I'll put a name. Again, I always remain in being consistent. So this is how I put my name. I'll put my first virtual network name, which is Raghuveer VNet 1. Then I'll put hyphen 2. This 2 is basically the direction that this is from one VNet to another VNet. Then I'll put my another VNet name, which is Raghuveer VNet 2. That's the name. This is the link name, that this link is from first network to the other network. That's it. So I put the name. I'll copy this name also. Then I'll leave the default option as it is. Then it says remote virtual network. Now I need to put the name for the remote virtual network. What will be displayed in the remote virtual network? So I'll copy that and I'll reverse it. Now I'm reversing this. So in the remote virtual network, the peering link name will be shown as that remote virtual network to the first virtual network. And in this virtual network, it is this virtual network to the remote virtual network. This is just the naming. There is no hard and fast rule. You could write anything. I'm just keeping it for the consistency purpose. When there are 100 virtual networks in my subscription, when there are 500 peering connections, then I can easily identify a peering connection by its name. So that's it. Then it says you have put the peering name for the remote network. Then it says now select your remote network. Which remote network is this? So you will select that remote network here, which is your second network. If you select your first network, it will give you an error. It say you cannot select the same network. You're already in that network. So you will select your second network. In a production environment, this list will be long. You will have 100 networks in the dropdown. You will need to select the network that you want to do peering with. That's it. Three information. First, name for the local network, remote network, and select the remote network. That's it. Hit add. The moment you hit add, you will see two operations. Two connections will be created. One from this network to another network to that remote network, and the other from that remote network to this remote network. See this. I'll click on add and see this too. It says added. Done. It's very quick. Done. Peering is done. Both the network are connected. Isn't it too simple?
Yeah, done.
Okay. A year ago, it would take half an hour. Okay. Once this peering is done,
So Raghuveer,
yeah.
there is some a warning is coming, right? One peerings are unable to connect to all the address spaces in this virtual network and must be synced. You must have contributor access to the peered virtual network to sync the virtual networks.
Yes, I got that too.
That is
Need to
coming.
ignore.
That is coming because you have two ranges there. In your network, you may have two ranges because of which it is coming, but that's just a warning. You can still go ahead.
Okay. Okay.
Right? Okay. So this peering is connected. And if you go to the RDP, the Bastion session, which is here, see, the response time is coming now. It has started, the other VM has started to respond. And if I just hit the connect, but once again, the RDP, it will respond. I'll get the connection prompt. See, I got the connection prompt. The other VM has started to respond to the ping, and it has also allowing me to connect. It is asking for me for the username and password.
On my second attempt, the VNet peerings worked fine.
Now, once the peering is done, you can go back to your RDP section and validate if the ping has started receiving response and if you're able to RDP.
Yeah, it's done.
Is it completed for everyone? And also I need you to validate these two things, the ping response as well as RDP.
Yes, it worked for me.
Akshay,
It worked. I'm able to log into second VM.
great.
Worked
And
for me
what
as well.
about ping response? Is ping responding now? Ping request?
Could we
Akshay,
log into the RDP?
Yeah, I'm checking it now.
Akshay, I'm asking if,
Yeah, I'm checking that now. I'm testing it.
okay. Akshay, what is the status?
For some reason, my remote desktop, it won't connect. From Bastion, I was able to get in through the link.
Hmm.
But now it won't connect.
No, Bastion host, the first VM in the first network, you're connected through Bastion host. From that VM, I want you to ping the other VM in the other network. Ping and RDP both. It will not work. Once you enable the VNet peering for both the network, it should work. That's what you need to validate.
Raghu, for me, pairing is connected, but still I think ping is not working. Ping as well as RDP. Pairing is showing as connected now.
Okay, we'll see that. But what about others?
Yep, I've connected.
Working.
Okay. Now, who is it
Working.
not working? Akshay, it is not working for you?
I'll try it again.
Okay, no worry.
Ping is working. RDP, I'm still checking.
That's okay. If ping works, RDP should also work.
Okay. Initially, it was actually throwing errors for a login failure.
See, if it says login failure, then it means that you're typing incorrect password, incorrect
No,
credentials.
I double checked that.
No. Akshay, listen to me. If it says login failure, which means you're getting the login prompt where you type the username and password, right?
No, that was not me.
Okay.
The question just now asked me, it was not me.
See, if you're getting this screen which says enter your credentials, it means the other VM is responding. But when you type incorrect credentials like this and hit OK, then it will be a login failure. But login failure is related to the incorrect credential, not to the connectivity. Your connectivity is working fine. That's the reason you're getting the login prompt.
Yeah, the RDP, it's actually kind of freeze right now.
Okay. You can disconnect the session and reconnect it once again if that is the case, but it will work, guys. Now,
Yeah,
let's
sure.
see the other aspect of it. So the first aspect, now, if I go back to my lab whiteboard, I see that this was not working, but as soon as I enabled the peering, this peering is known as regional peering because both my network are in the same region. They are in East US. As soon as I enabled this peering, now these virtual machines, 3 virtual machines, are able to connect with these 3 virtual machines. That's what peering is enabling. So by default, these network is creating isolation, wherein only the resources inside the network can communicate with each other. But when you enable the peering, those resources can communicate with one another across the network also. That's one validation that we have done. Now let's go back to the Bastion host and let's validate the Bastion host part as well. So earlier, when I was trying to connect to the other VM, so I'll go to my VM view. If I try to open the other VM and hit connect and select Bastion, previously when peering was not enabled, it was asking me to create a Bastion service, but this time it will not do. See, I'm hitting use and then done. It is asking me for the username and password, and you already see what Bastion service it is using. So since both networks are paired, Microsoft is able to recognize that yes, there is a one Bastion host in a peered network, and it is using that Bastion host. And it is just asking me for the credentials. If I provide the right credentials, I should be able to connect to this VM using a Bastion host, which is configured in a different network.
So one question on billing there. So you're only paying for the one Bastion host, or
Yeah.
are you paying for both? So if you're connected to both systems at once, you're only paying one fee. Is that correct?
You're only paying for the service. Now,
Yeah.
whether you use that service to connect to 10 VMs, 20 VMs in one network across the network, Microsoft don't bother about it. They'll only charge you for the service. So I have the
Excellent.
RDP, both the VMs you can see in my browser tab, WAP2 and WAP1. I have the RDP. And if I go to my Bastion service, now see how Bastion is helping an administrator. If I go to my Bastion service and open it, and if I go to sessions, I'll see all the sessions which are active right now. See, I've got 2 sessions which are active. You already see it on the browser window. 2 sessions are there. And it shows the session start time. It also talks the subscription, where the virtual machine belongs. The session are with the virtual machine. These are those virtual machines. This is the resource group to which the virtual machines belongs. And these are the users who have actually enabled those sessions. So the administrator, the Azure administrator or Bastion administrator can also see how many connections are active to Bastion host and who all users are there who are connected to which VM. All the information will be available here. So this will also help administrator to actually monitor the utilization of Bastion host services.
That's great.